they laugh when I say this, but God informs me all the time, all day. That's prophetic. And so in that, you begin to practically walk it out in your lifestyle every day. But it has to be practical. It can't just be spiritual.
Welcome to Kingdom Unleashed. Our mission is to revive the church, unlock the fivefold, and equip the saints. The key to growing in the fullness of Christ is to continually expose yourself to the different fivefold ministry gifts. It is Leadership Month at the Fivefold Ministry Academy, and in this interview, we have leadership expert Dr. Ulf Spears on the channel. Dr. Spears lives in California in the United States, and he is the founder and president of Strategic Leadership International, which is a consulting, coaching, mentoring, training organization that empowers emerging and seasoned leaders through seminars and trainings, coaching, and so forth, in order to change the leadership fabric of the planet. It's a wonderful, noble cause. So in session 1, we get into some of the backstory, and then we jump into leadership elements like how the apostolic and the prophetic bring real life solutions to the real world. Dr. Spears shares how we can take spiritual realities, your relationship with God, to tap into the Lord's wisdom and bring real life solutions to the problems of our world. Let's dive in. Yeah, guys, it is awesome for me to be joined by Dr. Ulf Spears, and it's Leadership Month at the Fivefold Academy, and so we are trusting to really impart some inspiration for each one of us to move forward in our leadership ability and really take hold of 2024. So, Dr. Spears, it is great to have you with me.
Yeah, it's great to be with you, Dr. Andre. It's early here and a little later there, so excited to do this with you.
Yeah, it is great. So we normally start off by getting a bit of the backstory, because when we know sort of the journey, we can really understand who you are and what you bring to the table. So let's jump into it. So what formed you as a leader, as a person? And take us back to some defining moments of your life.
Wow. I would say a defining moment was, believe it or not, my father leaving when I was a boy. And I was left as the head of the house at about the age of 8. And so I then had to take on responsibilities that I normally wouldn't have to. I would say the next thing was when I ended up leaving athletics because of different issues in college, and then transitioning into ministry and business and coaching and things like that. I would also say defining moment was being married. I was, an athlete in college, and I was also a Christian boy growing up in the Baptist church. And getting married, what it did was it put responsibility on me that I didn't have before as a single guy, as an athlete. And then the next one would be having children. We have 3 girls, and having to raise and be an example to 3 young ladies has been quite a challenge and quite an honor to do that. So I would say those are some defining moments in my life.
Okay. No, that's awesome. No, definitely, I agree with the marriage, kids. Yes. I always warn people when they're pregnant with the first one, it's like you have no idea. You have no idea what the struggles you're going to go through. So you were a basketball player and athlete. So take us back to that and the adversity you experienced and unpack that a little bit for us.
Yeah. So I was a inner city athlete. So I started off being a track athlete when I was in grade school and middle school. Was an All-American, what they call AAU here in the United States athlete, very tall, long at a young age, was always athletic, was told at a young age that was what was going to get me out of the inner city, because I grew up in the inner city with a lot of poverty. And so I stuck with athletics. I was good at it. Went through high school, was a high school all-state player in basketball, All-American. In basketball, and then went on to the university to play basketball and be on a scholarship. So from that, I was in about my second year, was a top 20 scorer in the nation at their university. And I was looking at being late first round, early second round NBA. And so I ended up breaking my foot and having some adversity. And then during that time too, God was calling me to ministry. And so it was a little bit frustrating on my part because I'm like, I'm going to make money. I'm getting out of the inner city.
I can believe.
Yeah, but God is calling me. So that shifted a lot. So I ended up leaving the university I was at, going to a Christian university, majoring in psychology, did play basketball there, was still an All-American, all district, all regional player. And then from there, believe it or not, went to a Christian camp with my wife at the time. We got married right before college or during college. And we went to a Christian camp and became kind of youth pastors. So that brought me into a life of youth pastoring and shepherding for about 15, 17 years. So
okay, that's awesome. So I presume that you could jump, because I understand white men can't jump.
I can jump, and I'm about 6'4", 6'5", so I'm a big guy. People are like, "Whoa, how big are shooting guards? They're pretty big." So 6'4",
I would have loved to see that
with a high jumping ability. I cannot do that now, though.
Yeah, no, that is what happens with age.
Yeah.
Okay, so. So when you went to college or you went to study, how did you experience, like as a black man, primarily amongst more, say, white folk? Was that challenging to you? What did you learn in that season or in seasons like that?
Yeah, that was a difficult season because I grew up in an environment where in a black community, but when I went into higher education, there's lots of white people, and I had to really get along. So I learned, to be honest, how to get along in that environment very well. And then I did have some crisis of things I didn't really have role models that were African-American in my life, not that many. And so I ended up getting some role models eventually, like, I don't know if you've heard of Miles Monroe.
Yes. Yeah. Legend.
Yeah, we used to go to his conferences, the Third World Conference over in the Bahamas back in the day. And so I just began to have some role models, that are different nationalities, but I had none that were African-American or African. And so I finally started kind of shaping my personality, or letting the Lord shape my personality as a black man. This is interesting. Sometimes people don't think about the fact that as a Christian, you love the Lord, but then you have to have some kind of underlining personality to go with that as a black man. So I had to really learn how to function as a Christian black man, not so much as I would use the word neuter or, neutral or even I couldn't be a white man because I wasn't, And so, it was very interesting. So that crisis really brought me into a place where I began to follow a lot of Miles Monroe's teachings, and leadership became kind of the center of who I was as a person. And everything I did was leadership. Every paper I wrote was on leadership. Everything I studied was leadership. And I just was taken by leadership. And to be honest, that's what put me on the path of being a leadership expert like today. So.
Yes. Okay, and so I mean, also you are playing a role often of like a diversity consultant, helping people in terms of how to engage in the complexities of different races or different colors. And so you still do that? You still involved with that?
I do. Matter of fact, the university that I'm at is a diverse university. And so, but before I went there, I was a diversity consultant with presidents of universities and the universities usually had Caucasian, white, male presidents. And so they would give me contracts, and I would go in and sit down with them and talk with them and pray with them and repent with them about things. And we would, talk through what it really meant to have a diverse university, a diverse perspective. And so that's how I started my consulting business at the time, and it went really well. I never really publicized it a great deal. It was relationships that were referred by other presidents, and I would come in sometime and train their leadership, their provosts, their vice presidents, their top faculty on diversity.
Okay.
And diversity in the Christian, so it's also in a Christian university. So it's not just university, Christian university. And so it was interesting. It was difficult in some instances, and then in other ways it was very rewarding. I ended up getting, I think, with my university, a top alumni award because of the work I did with
that's awesome.
my former my alma mater. So,
okay, that's awesome. Because I think, my engagement with people who are, say, different colors is like we tend to not understand the other person's role and how difficult it is for them, coming from their culture, their community, and so I can just imagine that your perspective, and I think that's for white people sometimes don't understand the other side, and so that's awesome.
Yeah, I think that you're right, but I also think that a lot of African Americans or people of color don't always know how to break down those barriers. I think the goal is not to blame or to put anything on maybe the Caucasian, the white leader, but really is to really be there to understand and be able to say, okay, now this is healthy. This is not. This is prejudice. This is racism. This is not. And I never did that in front of people. So it never was a disrespect. Does that make sense?
Yes.
A lot of people, they'll get out in front and they'll scream, which that's not my calling.
Yes.
They'll scream and they'll do stuff. But not me. I'll let somebody make a mistake in front of people. And then behind the scenes, I'll say, what were you doing? What did you just say?
What were you thinking?
What were you thinking when you said that? And they're like, I didn't know. I say, well, I'm letting you know behind the scenes where nobody is. So when you go out next time.
That's good.
So I was a coach. I was an executive. So I think a more redemptive way to go about that, to coach leaders and coach presidents of universities, white Christian leaders, that's what they were, white Christian CEOs or presidents of universities, to be able to, like I said, repent with them, laugh with them, get along, let them learn to trust me and me trust them. And they would always say to me, why do you do this? And I said, well, because first of all, the Lord called me to do it. I said, secondly, I'm going to laugh at this. I'm good at it. I'm trained for it. And I said, the next thing is I said, I really know you more than you think that I do. Because I grew up having to adapt to the culture.
Yeah. So you're a bridge builder.
There you go.
You understand both sides. So.
Right. So I said, so I can anticipate what you're going to say, what you're going to do, what you're feeling, your defense mechanism. And so I decided, so then I know when you're kind of fearful. Now, so this is funny. All of this stuff is not just my training. It's also the apostolic, the prophetic. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah.
So it all kind of now flows together, and it's not something that's in buckets. It's a part of the call. So I can very quickly connect the dots and find out where somebody is. And then I'm able to use coaching to ask questions to be able to then really support and encourage and empower the leader. And so,
that's good. That's good. Yeah. So I think sometimes people forget, that there's a real enemy, and the devil's plan is to divide, whether it's race or theology, or his mission is to break down marriages and families and churches and culture and people and nations. And I think so. I like what you said. It doesn't help to blame the other side. It's like, no, you're not a victim, because the moment I think victim mentality comes, we find ourselves in a bad space. And I've just been telling myself this last season, I refuse to have enemies. I refuse from somebody else's perspective I might be enemy, or they might not like me. I have no enemies. I refuse to have enemies. I'm just going to love people. And I think that removes the fear. Have you seen that in your engagement, that the fear factor obviously constrains relationships and causes people to think and do stupid?
I have, and people, and I'm glad you said that. And I'll use this: division is part of, the spirit behind what we call prejudice or racism, but it's really to divide, and it's really to get people in contention and everything. So it's a spiritual act that I'm doing when I'm working with these Christian presidents. It's a spiritual act, and so I am literally there. And I'll use this word because people don't use it a lot in these types of environments. I'm really dealing with a principality. People don't see it as that, but I'm dealing with a principality as an apostle, as a prophetic leader, as I'm dealing with these Christian university presidents. There's fear that comes when I can see it when it comes on. It's sometimes for the group that I worked with, they would get fearful about money. They get fearful about how they were going to fund stuff that we talked about. So because there are different initiatives that they eventually had it come into their school that worked with minority students, and they were fearful about, I can't fund it. And then when the money came in, they said, guess what? $750,000 just was donated for this program we've been praying about. And I'm like, look at God, look at God. Yeah. And so what it did was it took away all these fears of dealing with minority vision and unity and all these different things. There's a lot of fears around that. How you'll be viewed in society, in your community, how you'll be viewed, as it comes to fundraising as a Christian president of a university, how you'll be seen among your colleagues that are mostly Caucasian white males. When you start bringing these new fresh visions in, and those kind of things. So it's a spiritual act that people don't know. You're doing it naturally, and you're doing it, by skill and coaching and consulting and all of that. So that's all there. You need to have that to be a professional. But there's also the spiritual element of saying, guess what? There has been in the past division that's come because people haven't recognized that it's real high level warfare.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we sometimes think of work is just work, and we disconnect Sunday church from real life, and it's not disconnected. We should be bringing in Christ into every environment to shift the atmosphere. Yeah. And so how do you see the apostolic, prophetic, because one of the things I feel like the apostolic releases faith instead of fear. It's one of the things I feel like the apostolic prophetic shifts the atmosphere. Even like you're saying, that principalities as a special authority. But anyway, give me a bit of how you see that in the fivefold.
Yeah. So as an apostle, faith is like one of the number one things that I walk in to be able to do what I do. And so you obviously the prophetic kind of informs you, but the faith is if you believe God for whatever he wants done. And so I would say, because what I'm talking about is more marketplace and Christian kingdom type of marketplace stuff. So it really helps when I'm, like I mentioned, coaching. It really helps when I'm dealing with different resistant parts of, let's just say, the staff or the faculty or the long-term vision that they're trying to adopt, because you're dealing with historical roots then too, right? So historical roots and things that might bring tension or really look to stop what God is trying to do. We're dealing with that as apostles and prophets to really uproot that without destroying the organization. Isn't that interesting? Being very what do you call it? Being very strategic, being very surgical.
Yes.
In how you do it. So it's not just a plowing or a bulldozing. It's really like surgery. And so you have to be strong and powerful and rewire, reroute, reboot. But you also have to preserve the good things that have been done, the right things that have been done. And if not, then it's not used. The wisdom of the Lord is not being used. It's like, okay, we're going to bring in something new, but we're destroying the good things that have been done in the past. That's not what we want to do. We want to be able to bring about a real change that's lasting, preserve what the good things, godly things that have been established and done. And then from there, be able to look toward the future, and lay out some future things that need to be accomplished. So that's what I would say. Does that help?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. No, it does. It does. I think like what you're saying also is, like communism, one of the tenets of communism is to destroy. It wants a revolt. It wants rebellion. It wants to destroy everything and then build up, supposedly.
Mm-hmm.
And we know obviously history of communism is terrible amount of people that had to die. So I love what you're saying, like, that you build on the good. You don't come into to break down, although you break down negatives, but you build on the good. And I just imagine some of the prophetic, able to see in the spirit, what is happening in the spirit, and getting wisdom from the Lord on how to actually tackle it.
Yeah. So I'll speak to that. It's interesting you say that, because as an apostle, you have to be able to pioneer, and you have to be able to move things, and you have to be able to have the authority and be able to be authorized to do certain things. But as a prophetic person, you have to be able to detect things, and then be able to, through wisdom, be able to I'll use this word, diagnose things, and then be able to then bring a remedy. And so I don't think prophetic is always used like that. It's used more as a quickening or a word or this. I sometimes see the prophetic as wisdom, and not just being able to identify what's happening, diagnosing something, but being able to say, okay, what's the wisdom on how to get through this, and how to build this, and how to restore this, and how to rejuvenate this and renew this. And to me, the Lord is, the scripture in Acts, it talks about the Lord needed wisdom, basically. So he called the apostles and the prophets. And so apostles and prophets came because God needed the wisdom in the earth. And so with that, I see the prophetic as an enabler to be able to take information and to be able to then practically apply it for solutions in the earth. And so I always laugh at it, because I was like everybody else with the prophetic years ago, where I just, seek and say, prophesy and go, this and that. And then I got into the marketplace, and I really recognized that that's not how it worked. The way it worked was wisdom and knowledge, and you had to be able to apply it, and it had to bring results. And, people would say, well, you're very prophetic, but you don't seem like you that. I said, well, because I've grown through all of those stages of the prophetic, of, quickening and, praying in tongues, out of control, falling out, jumping around, screaming, all the things that people do sometimes, dreams and visions and all those things just became normal.
Yes.
And then I was able to then say, okay, how do I professionally go out in the community, in an unbelieving community, and also in believing communities, and be able to minister, and at the same time do business, and do it with ethics, and do it with integrity. And, how do you do that? And so that's what I've over the years been basically refining, and getting better at every day, is being able to professionally represent the Lord as an apostle in not only the church, but also in the marketplace. So
I love that. That's really good. I like what you're saying, because sometimes, again, I think there's a disconnect between spiritual life and real life. And what you're saying is the authentic, mature, apostolic, prophetic should have real results.
Yes.
Real results in the real world. I love what you're saying in terms of solutions in the marketplace. And, we're doing this recording at the end of 2023, but we want to get into how are we going to tackle 2024? So how do we bring real world change, real life change into our workplaces, into our churches, into our homes? And so there's that as you're saying, that in the bridge. But how do you learn how to take the spiritual and to bring it into like real life? Because some people are just like pie in the sky, but hey, their lives are a mess. And
Right.
and is that where you love you have a passion for mentoring and coaching? So take us through a little bit of that. How do you navigate from the spiritual to the natural and the mentoring, coaching kind of thing as well?
Yeah. So I'm what's called a scholar practitioner. And so my whole way of doing things is to research what we call the concrete, and then to be able to practically take it and be able to use it in very practical ways. And so I do the same things with spiritual things. And so say, there's prayer that happens. There's the prophetic that happens. God is informed. They laugh when I say this, but God informs me all the time, all day. That's prophetic. And so in that, you begin to practically walk it out in your lifestyle every day. But it has to be practical. It can't just be spiritual. Okay. So spiritual, it's something that's immaterial, spiritual. So you have to be able to, how does you move it from immaterial to spiritual? From spiritual, immaterial to practical, natural, is we have to see ourselves as the vehicle of God to move these things into the earth.
Yes. Yeah.
I agree. People don't always think like that. They think that you just have to, leave it in the spiritual and you separate it. No, we're the vehicle that carries his presence and carries his wisdom into the earth, into our jobs every day, into our families every day, into our relationships every day. And so if that is true, then I'll begin to speak now about mentoring and coaching. Then we become these vessels of wisdom and solutions for people in mentoring and coaching.
Yes.
And so now we stand and sit before people and coaching them with solutions and answers to what they're asking. And so, people are like, well, you gotta, you can't do that. There's not. I said, no, that's God. God is wisdom. God is the one who gives us and informs us about what people need, and I think it's a scripture in Psalms 139. It talks about he wrote everything in his book, and I always tell people prophetically, we really prophesy out of that book. God reveals that for real prophets and real apostles. We don't come from some other weird place, ominous, dark place. We come from the book on people's life that God allowed us to have access to because he trusts us.
Yes, so the Lord gives one the edge. We have access to unlimited knowledge and insight.
Yes,
and even into the future.
Yes,
which is just mind blowing to think.
It is. So that whole coaching, mentoring piece is really just a facilitation mode and tool to get God's wisdom to people.
So practically, how do you go by that? How do you tune into the voice of God? Is it because of your prayer time early in the morning? Is it something you've developed over time? Give us maybe the practical side of things in terms of how do we tune into the voice of God or into that, God's wisdom? Just something that you apply maybe in your life.
Yeah. So it's one word, yield. And it's a really tough thing I'm going to say this for my own self, for me as a dude, me as a guy. So I grew up when I was younger in prayer meetings with lots of women. And so they would be praying and, you're going to laugh at this. They'd be purging and, bucking and Jesus. But I asked the Lord, I said, I'm not a woman. I'm a man. And so what do they have that I don't have? And he just said very clearly, yielding. You're not used to yielding. You're used to being the one that's pushing it forth and initiating and all that. And he just said to me, I'm the initiator. You're the yielder.
Oh, yes, that's good.
I was like, oops. I said, and I had to ask him, how do you yield? I don't know how to yield. And so I've been practicing yielding for years now. So for me, hearing the voice of God is not hard. I just yield. The Lord I yield and he informs me about stuff. And people say, well, shouldn't you have some kind of quickening? I mean, sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. A lot of times it's just, I have gotten used, and this is going to be very interesting. I've gotten used, quickening for me has, and I'll use the word quickening, but also I'll use the word, I had to turn quickening into a lifestyle, an unction into a language. The language had to be turned into some kind of dialogue and vocabulary. So I couldn't stay at quickening. I had to turn it in over time, I had to build it into part of my life. It had to be part of who I am 24/7. I saw a quote the other day to say the apostolic is somebody who lives 100% in mission. That's my life. I want to live 100% in the mission and calling of my commission in life is to raise up leaders, high level leaders in his body. And, and that's a way in which we bring in those to Christ. That's the way in which we prepare people to lead on behalf of the Lord. But I had to literally, so yielding, and then all the stuff I just mentioned had to be developed from an utterance to a language, to a vocabulary. And then eventually that's how a lot of my books and things like that came out, was I had to learn the language of the Lord for what he called me to do. So
that's good.
Yeah.
So in terms of what you said, like quickening, is that what you say? Is that the encounter with God? Like
yes.
the moment with God, and then there's a playing out. It can't stay at the encounter. It needs to become a lifestyle, change your way of thinking, change your way of speaking, living, and then implementing it in your life.
Yes. Yeah. No, I think you're one of the first people to follow me on that. Some people say, you're kind of crazy, because I can't often talk like this around people, because people don't have the combination that you talked about of the natural, the spiritual. They're either playing on one or the other side. They don't get it. They're missing it. You just grabbed hold of kind of the fullness of what happens. So, because people talk about the quickening or the unction or whatever that comes with the prophetic, and I was always left like, is that it with God? And then after a while, I'm like, how does this thing stay with me?
Yes.
And then so I'm a question guy. So I'll just ask God questions. Okay, this is how it stays with me. How do I develop it? Okay, how do I develop it? Okay, how does it become part of who I am? And then from there, okay, not just part of who I am, it brings success in my life and success for you. And it's a good witness for you. And how do I embody it and live it? How do I pass it on to mentees?
Yeah, that's good questions.
You see what I'm saying? So that's how I normally, as a researcher, as a doctor, I learned that just lots of questions are the thing that help to move and open the doors that need to be opened.
And that's connected, I think, to what you're saying. Like, you're on mission. You have a mission to see transformation, to see change in community or in people's lives. And so it can't stop just with the encounter or the quickening. It can't stop just with having an encounter or a prophecy. It needs to transition. And I think for us standing at the start of 2024, for those watching now, that I think that is something we can take with us to say, hey, let's transition this. Let's make it a goal for our lives. Let's obviously pursue God, like you're saying, yield. I love that. I think women tend to yield easier than men, I think. So I think that's what comes easier.
I'll let you say that.
Yeah, we boys need help. We need help. But then if we could make this year like a goal for us, say, let's yield more to the Lord. Let's have those quickening moments. Let's have those moments with God. But then let's get on mission and see an outplay of God's wisdom and goodness and glory into the workplace or the church or community or wherever he calls us to be. So that is great. So thank you, Dr. Ulf. We're going to continue in the next session.
All right. Thank you.
That was a superb warm-up for our leadership discussion, but it's the next session that will really speak to you. Don't miss this next session. Dr. Spears shares about healing the leadership soul and how he went through a midlife crisis where he almost lost his wife and kids. You need to hear this. It will help you heal your soul and bring healing to others. For more content like this, subscribe to the channel. And if the interviews help you, please share it with others. Click on the next session on the end screen for part 2 of the interview with Dr. Ulf Spears.